nominated by the Keys. So I'm very prepared to nominate him.
Tried to get me to take a ride. But John, luckily, not knowing that I'd been.
Well, yes, you could have bought me a few drinks, and I would have. Yes, I did this for nothing.
Have we got many more to come in? Or do you want to start then?
I come and help you.
I should have a lecture. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RIBA North for this year's AGM. It's great to see everyone. Once again, still feels lovely to be seeing people in person rather than over Zoom. So thank you for making the trek down here. I'm going to introduce Roger. Roger is going to be doing all of the hard work this evening. I'm largely going to be nodding and smiling. Roger, it's pretty much my intro.
That's right. Well, I want to welcome everybody as well. You know, it's really nice to be back here in RIBA North, which is sort of MCS's home. It's a lovely, lovely building. It's an important space in Liverpool for everybody, not just MCS. And I hope there will come a time when RIBA realise how important RIBA North is, and they plough loads of money into RIBA North and give them back what they've lost. For you, those of you who don't know, I imagine most of you do, MCS is here really to campaign to preserve the best of our existing buildings and spaces, and of course the adoption of the highest quality design for the development of new schemes that will benefit the city region in the future. So it's more than appropriate that our speaker tonight is Liverpool City Region Design Champion Paul Monaghan. We very much welcome Paul to tonight's event. I will introduce him properly later. Before we go to Paul, however, I have the terribly exciting prospect of the AGM, which includes reports, elections, and a look ahead to 2023. And by the way, we are recording the speakers this evening, just so you don't know. That's for those unable to attend, so we can go more widely. So, to the AGM. First of all, you've got apologies from Glyn Marsden. Ian Ray, Peter Elson, Harriet Gilmore, and Dave Chetwin. Anybody else know of anybody who wants to send apologies that haven't arrived? No. Now then, the minutes of the AGM, of last year's AGM, have you seen them?
They will circulate, give some copy on their seats.
Do you want to quickly have a look through and see if they're what you think they should be? We look at apologies for absence, yeah, that's fine. Minutes of previous meeting, nothing there. Election of members. You can see people who've been elected, election of officers, Jean Grant appointed Vice President, the annual report, Treasurer's report, appointment of DJ Wrightson as Honorary Auditor, and a look ahead from Gavin. Is there anybody who is unhappy with any of that? Good. And are there any matters arising? Right, that's great. That's the way to go. Now, we have to elect MCS officers to serve 21-22, and we've had people who prepared, sort of, to do it. Chair, Professor John Belcham, Vice Chair, Gavin Davenport, Honorary Secretary, Pam Wiltshire, Honorary Treasurer, Tris Dowling. Now, is there anybody else who would like to be nominated? No, I thought not. So, if not, the above names, therefore, are duly elected. Then we have to elect members of the MCS Council. There are 7 vacancies and 6 nominations. The nominations are Eddie Taylor, Mark Smith, Anthony Spencer, Andrew Jackson, Sebastian Debski, and Peter Elson. Any further nominations? No. So I declare the above named duly elected to serve for the next 3 years, or up to 3 years. Now, at the moment, the chair sort of is Gavin. For a minute or two. So Gavin's going to introduce the council's annual report, again, which you should have a copy of, I imagine.
Brilliant, yeah. So we direct your attention to the annual report. It's one of our obligations that we document what we've been up to, and I won't labour this too much, but in looking at the report, I'd like to draw your attention to a few things. I feel like I said this last year, but it's just been fantastic to return to real in-person events. Although we've come a long way and having things on Zoom in the last couple of years has been a fantastic addition to what we've been able to do. It's just been superb to actually have people meeting up and engaging with the city once again. We've had a 25% increase in membership since last year, which is great. And again, to repeat myself from last year, it's down to people within the society encouraging other people to join, speaking to those community groups that we're part of, and the people that we meet day to day. We can try and continue to increase that. We continue with the conservation area walks, and we had almost 200 people attend those events this year. And that returned to a wider programme of real events, included things like the Prescott Heritage Trail and the new Shakespeare North. We also worked with Historic England on a project in Gattaca, which was really successful, both in terms of bringing some revenue in, but engaging both our own membership and local civic societies within the city in terms of working with a national organisation on a pilot project to look at local listing. Hopefully that's the sort of thing that will continue. I think it was successful. Pam, I'm looking to you.
Yeah, we enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, Pam was instrumental in making that happen, both in principle and on the ground. So thank you. And we published the outcomes of the consultation that we did with our membership in the past year, looking at expanding the view of heritage on both sides of the river. All of that, of course, is documented within annual reports. That's pretty much what I have to say.
So any questions on that, Fiona? No? Okay. Finance report, very exciting moment. David Massey will speak, I think, to those accounts, and then current treasurer Trish Dowling will speak to the 22 accounts.
Move, David.
No, it's fine.
My notes is in your seat.
Trish, are you there? Yes. So he's 21, she's 22. I'm talking about the
I wish.
Yes, come on, time to catch up. Well, good evening, everyone. As Roger's just mentioned, I was acting treasurer for 21, and so I'll report on that year. And Trish was elected at our last AGM, and so she'll be updating you on the current year, 2022. Matters are covered in much more detail in the printed accounts, stated accounts, and the finance report, which you've got in your papers, which are scattered around. If you haven't got one near you, do grab one before you go, because there's some lovely printed annual reports there, which we want you to take away and distribute, and as well as read. So I'll mention just a few bullet points rather than go through in detail. First, the accounts before you are those which were approved by the MCS Council rather than the audited ones, which we'd like to have. But due to circumstances beyond our control in a sequence, they've only just got them to Dr. Jim Wrights, and he's got the books and papers now, and he will be reporting back on his findings at the January meeting. Secondly, if you can turn to the accounts page and go to the very bottom of it and move your eye across from the left-hand column to the right-hand column, you'll see that there's been a totally unprecedented jump in it. So I'm pointing that out to you. Now, where's that come from? Well, it's come from the Fountain Restoration Campaign, as mentioned earlier, and the establishment of a fund to pay for initial surveys and other related matters. The donations for this go into what we are told term a restricted fund. In other words, the money that goes for there has to be spent on that restricted set of objectives. not into the general pockets of the society to be spent on the treasurer's outing to Davos or somewhere like that. And I'm pleased to report that by the end of the year, we've raised over 8,500 against a target of 12,500. And we were well in a position to meet our initial charge, the first survey at the beginning of 2022, but Trish will say something about that. Thirdly, I'd like to thank all those who contributed through their uncosted time, efforts and skills to helping society during the year. This is essentially how a group of civic volunteers keeps going, not through paid services and the like. And they're very helpful when you can get them. And finally, a word of thanks to our Honorary Auditor, Jim Wrightson, who, if I can slightly jump ahead with the Chair's permission, to say that he has agreed to be auditor for the 2022 accounts, which we'll get on to earlier. I'm happy to answer any general questions now, or more detailed ones later on after the meeting is concluded. But immediately I'll hand over to Trish for 2022.
David, good evening everyone. David covered quite a bit of this. This is really our interim financial report, so there aren't any actual figures in it. First item is we had potential that we have public liability insurance, and our policy expired last year, and then the company that was covering us decided that they weren't going to do that kind of cover anymore. So we trawled around carefully, and we found a policy from Zurich Insurance, which provides exactly the cover that we want at what we consider to be a very reasonable cost. Okay, so we're covered until the 3rd of November. Restricted accounts, David's already explained. I'm sure you all know exactly what that means. The restricted accounts, so the funds are ring fenced and we can't use them for, especially not going to Davos. We've got two, we had two this year, the Gattaca listing project. We were approached by Historic England with an offer to pay us to set up a project examining the current listings of buildings in an area which was to be our choice, and we chose Gattaca. Wealth of this, you know. Included in the funding was a management fee, which was kindly donated back to the society. So thank you, Pam, for that. Pam did that. The second restricted account is the Fountain Fund, which David's already referred to. It's the proposed restoration of the bucket fountain. The initial technical survey, the phase 1 of the survey, has been carried out, and that did cost £3,800. We initially had a target of 12,500. We have reached it thanks to a very generous individual donation. Right, income now. Income's been generated in a variety of ways. I'm just going to talk about two of them. First one is, which walking tours, which Pam's run. Pam's run a very successful programme of guided walking tours. And this is where the insurance was necessary for us to buy, because although the guides have got their own insurance, we wanted to make sure that everybody involved, just in case, because you know, in this litigious age in which we find ourselves. Anyway, so all participants will be covered for that. Second income stream I'm going to mention is our donation scheme. Merseyside Civic Society no longer requires its members to pay a membership subscription. Members are instead encouraged to make an annual donation. Possibly as a result of this, our standing orders and PayPal contributions are dwindling somewhat, and Council needs to give some thought to maintaining a balance between future fundraising and covering our routine expenditure. And at this point, I think it's appropriate for me to mention thanks to Anne, please, who's agreed to help Pam going forward with membership inquiry. And what to do. Our full financial report for 2022 will be presented at the 2023 AGM, which will come round soon. Okay, thanks everybody.
Any questions to my talk?
Questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Reports. And as we I'm not quite sure we actually have to vote on the nomination of Jim Wrightson as independent examiner of accounts. I don't think we do. But anyhow, I'm going to take it that unanimously we agree to that.
It will be in the minutes, I think.
Great, thank you. Now, we're going to hear for the last time from retiring chair, Gavin Davenport, and from the newly elected chair, and I'd like to thank you very much for taking it on. That's John Belch.
I'll come and sit back down and I'll swap with
I will
John
do
at
that.
the appropriate moment.
So going to look ahead to 2023.
I've not got my glasses on, but I can zoom in on my phone, so this is a technical solution. So Pam's already been mentioned twice, but I will frequently be thanking and referring to Pam's incredible efforts over the last couple of years. I changed my day job in 2018, just as I took this role on, and have steadily been unable to attend any meetings during the day, numerous meetings in an evening, and instead have been reliant on Pam and David covering me. So very grateful that John's going to step in and be a bit more available than I have been. So look forward to that. As has been mentioned in the financial report, I'm really thrilled that we've reached that fundraising target for the bucket fountain. And that is hopefully going to be something that continues to take up my time over the next couple of years as we start to look at a formal fundraising application, hopefully with the National Lottery Heritage Fund, but working with the leaseholder and with the City Council to get things moving in that regard. And I'm speaking to a surveyor at the moment, hoping to finalise some of those aspects. So we mentioned already that it's been really nice to have that return to face-to-face things. Our first event was is going to be in January with Bill Addy here at RIBA. That's correct, isn't it? Correct. We've also taken part in setting up a working group around the forthcoming anniversary of the Liverpool Manchester Railway, and that will be meeting again in the spring. As has been mentioned in the financial report, we've moved towards this model of donation-based membership, and that's been great in terms of increasing numbers and the diversity of our members, but it does raise questions. So in terms of our income, so as I've sort of said in passing before, it would be wonderful if people could encourage their friends, family, neighbours, interested parties, in those with an interest in civic life within the city, to get involved with the society and potentially to consider making a modest donation. We're hoping to step up the awards. We've presented the Rita Cheeseman Heritage Award in the past few years, but looking at expanding that award scheme going forwards, and we should be presenting awards next year. And I'd like to welcome those new members of the council. I look forward to seeing you at a council meeting, but I also look forward to not being the person chairing that. So I'm going to invite John to introduce himself. I was thrilled when I saw John's name come forward. I've been very, very privileged to work with John before when I was project managing at the Blue Coat. I have been involved in a book to which John was also a much more significant contributor than myself. And John's been heavily involved with World Heritage in the city and is supremely knowledgeable about things that I think will serve MCS very, very well. So can I introduce John Belcher, our new chair.
Well, yes, I think I'm really known as the Gavin continuity candidate for that. Obviously, I want to keep as many things going as I can, going so well. What's really exciting me about the MCS, perhaps this is the reason why I've never ever cancelled my standing order. I'm one of those few who's kept going that way. Is the way you've responded to the loss of UNESCO World Heritage Site status. The plans that you have to actually think about national heritage areas. Now, I tried at the last meeting of, I hate to use the word now, because it actually was the mayor's task force. So of course, that's a little bit of a stigma to use that particular designation. But anyhow, the last meeting of the task force, I said, well, look, why can't we do with what's happened here what we did after the party ended with Capital of Culture. We suddenly came up with the idea of City of Culture. And, we had this great competition for it. So I thought, well, why can't we actually redefine what we mean by heritage in a damn sight more sensible way than UNESCO and ICOMOS and other people do, and actually realise that Liverpool has one of the greatest historical urban frameworks. And why don't we say, well, look, we're going to run it, we're going to safeguard it, we're going to promote it, we're going to enhance it through this particular way. Why don't you follow suit? And why don't we have a competition so that every year or every 4 or 5 years or whatever, the spotlight would fall on a specially chosen historic urban framework? Well, I didn't really win that argument, but I'm prepared to sort of translate that into what you're trying to do with the notion of a heritage area here, which I'm delighted to say gets rid of the traditional problem of the balkanisation of Merseyside. It actually is going to be cross river, and that will be something which I really would like to see happen. And on that theme, and I'll shut up at this point so we can listen to our distinguished speaker, I'd like to think that we could also have a more federal approach to the way throughout Merseyside we try to enhance the built environment, the way we safeguard, protect and promote our heritage. So if MCS could become like the umbrella organisation, I'm not trying to say I've got this imperialist agenda, or we don't want to take over all these other things, but if we could be sort of a cover which would be a protected cover over all of these organisations, which would, I hope, by coming together would enhance their efforts and so on. So I thank you so much for electing me. I was so much hoping there was going to be a contest, and even more hoping that I was going to lose it. But alas, that has not come to pass. So anyhow, I look forward to chairing council and various other things that I'll be doing for the next year. So thank you.
Thank you, John. And that formally brings the AGM to an end. Thank you all for attending. We now get on to the most important part of the event, why we're really all here, our guest speaker. Paul Monaghan is the first Liverpool City Region Design Champion, appointed to that role in 2015 by the Metro University of Rotherham. And although Paul is one of the founding members of the London-based RIBA Sterling Prize-winning architecture practice offered Hall, Monaghan and Norris, he's actually a local lad from West Derby, and he's become one of the country's leading architects. He was educated here at St Edward's College, studied architecture at Sheffield University in 1983, where in 2018 he received an honorary doctorate of letters. He went to UCL's Bartlett School of Architecture, where he's now a visiting professor, as well as the Universities of Virginia and St Louis. He's a very busy man. He's been judge or jury chair for many years, including the RIBA Young Architect of the Year, the RIBA Construction Industry, and the RIBA Awards for Architecture. He was a judge for the RIBA Sterling Prize in 2016, and that was the year after his practice won the Sterling Prize itself. He's an advisor for the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission, a member of the Design Council's National Design Review Panel, and a RIBA Client Design Advisor. How he's found the time to come up here and speak today, I really don't know, but please give him a very big welcome. Paul Monaghan.
Hi everyone, and very honoured to be here tonight. And I really do believe that civic society is a really important role in planning system and protection of our heritage. So it's great to be here. And I'm going to do a little bit of talk about what I try and do with the design champion, and then I'll finish off with a few things that are just some of the work we've done, but only a couple of things. Oh, we're going the wrong way. That's good. So I've done a few buildings in Liverpool. This is a big one of the ones we did about 20 years ago. It's our first project back here, and yeah, an interesting client at the time, but it's housing and offices. Most important to me because the windows down the front here, where the staircase is Morse code, it spells my mum's name down. No one realised afterwards. Unfortunately, she's not around anymore, but she did like it when we went to a restaurant and a girl said to her, "Do you know, there's a guy here who's an architect whose mum's name's down in front." And my mum, I could have paid her money, my mum was socialising. I'm going the wrong way again. And I also did the Royal Club. I'll talk a bit more about that. So, yeah, this is, so I got invited, actually it was the RIBA who got me involved, to be the design champion for the region, working with Steve Rotherham. And I suppose, yeah, this is vaguely what I think I do. I'd say it's voluntary, there's nothing, you know, and it's advisory, there's no statutory parts of it, but I'm always interested in things where I can help. But I suppose I suppose I'm not going to read those things, but I see it as promoting, number one, architecture in Liverpool, and the architects who are in Liverpool, and trying to show people outside the region that there is strong talent here, which I believe there is. I see parts of it being part of education as well, and helping school kids being interested in architecture. I'm sort of a bit involved with trying to promote better design, better projects coming through, but you know, I'm not the city council, and city council, the planners, and some people get confused about that. Sometimes I haven't got any power in that. But I suppose I'm interested in better design. And this was just a snapshot of buildings that won RIBA awards for the last, since 2019. And I suppose what I'd highlight there is 5 in 4 years, 3 years, we could be doing better to win more awards. And I think certainly when I see the talent that's in Liverpool, also noting quite a lot of those architects are outside Liverpool. So I suppose that's one part of it. I do believe in better public buildings. I mean, Liverpool's got some great public buildings, like the Everyman, fantastic refurbishment. And Monaghan, I'm sure you all know about. And I suppose one of the more high-profile projects that's being built at the moment is for the architecture school by the gold medal and then they haven't won the Sterling Prize, O'Donnell and Toomey from Dublin, which I think is on site now. Probably is a bit of a Marmite building for some people, but anyway, they're very well, world-renowned architects. That's great. I'd love to see more Liverpool architects doing buildings that are of interest outside the region. Thank you. I think, as mentioned, I got involved for my sins about 4 years ago with Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission for the government, and as an advisor. And we produced this document, which was, just January 2020, which I think if any of you haven't read it, it is really interesting because it is trying to promote better design everywhere, particularly in housing. Since then, I've got more involved with a thing called National Model Design Codes, which are really trying to help local authorities control design in a better way. And from trying to make it easy for them to do this, despite the resources being diminished in most planning departments over the last 4 years. It's a bit of a contradiction because who's diminishing the money? But anyway, there we go. So I think the design codes are a good thing. I think they allow councils to look at master plans for whole areas rather than individual developers coming up and asking for it out. And I think that's sort of something that could be important. Since then, it's now called the Office for Place. So I'm one of a set of advisors who are trying to promote this. It's under the Planning Department, which Michael Gove was in charge of, and occasionally you'll see today that he came out with something about design codes. He quite often suggests that Ambry is a good way of doing design in traditional architecture, but I know also that the department believes that good contemporary design can work as well. I'm also a design advisor for the mayor. I mean, I have all these things, but I didn't always do a lot with them. I haven't done anything for the design advocates since I've been appointed one, but that is more about design review for projects. So they're my other roles. And I suppose just in Liverpool, the things that I can't really get involved with, but I think are really important. clearly Liverpool Waters, which obviously has been pretty controversial at times, but the work I've seen of it, it seems to be that the master plan has some great qualities, some good landscape. And as I always say, this bit has been derelict since I was 3, so that's the early 60s. I think the other one is the Garden Festival site, which I don't know where it is at the moment, but I think that's really important because the council and the city region are putting money into it. But I think again, just the last few years, it's slightly gone on hold. And then clearly Wirral Waters on the other side is a massive development. It's Peel Holdings, isn't it? Who also a little bit, and that's also going to be an important development. It has got going over the years, but in quite a piecemeal manner. As in the Office for Place, we're great believers in design codes. Also interested in consultation, how you talk to the people whose the development is affecting, and using both more traditional techniques like meeting people and talking about it, and talking about the idea of co-creating, so people being part of it. Also using more digital tools now, which often reach more people, because rather than going to a rainy church hall on a Tuesday night in winter, sort of contribute. So that's something that we're interested in. But the other thing I'm very interested in is design review. And so here you have Places Matter. And I'd like to see Places Matter used more for important public buildings in Liverpool. Continually trying campaign for that, but it's trying to find the money for projects that might not have the money to go to design review. So there are things that I suppose I talk about, but have no ability to deal with in terms of, apart from having a chat with Steve and asking whether he can put some money in for certain projects, which I do on a reasonably regular basis. What I have found I can do is do promotional activities and events. And I think in a way to raise awareness of the talent of the city. And this was the first thing I did, and you can see in this building we had architects. We had half the architects were from Liverpool and half the architects were from around the country. A lot of them from London, very well-known firms, and then mixing with Liverpool architects. And what we picked was 6 sites around the city region, all given to us by the city region, and asked them to have an idea about that and draw it up. And it was a huge day here. The building was absolutely full of architects, and we had great critics, including Paul Finch, Mari, who's Museum of Liverpool, Julian, who's Landscapes, Selena's Manleys, Jonathan, who's Urban Splash, and Louise, who was at the time Chief Executive of Homes England. So, again, some of the Liverpool practices shared, who are probably most well-known, one of the most well-known architects here. Didier Mutter, a young up-and-coming firm. All of them later. We had the universities, both universities involved, which was great, and actually did some of the best work, which was interesting. K2, another well-known firm here. And then Magma, who I'm really pleased to say have just been part of the winning team for the Liverpool Playhouse. I say that slightly bitterly because we didn't win it, but I can enjoy that and Matthew's success there, because I think it's great. And this today in the Architects Journal, the names all over, which is great, which is what we need. And great firm, Harrison Stringfellow, did a beautiful project. Again, University of Liverpool, Smith Young. And then, sorry, I only got this one because they're from London, but they did a fantastic idea of having a Beatles festival in Otterspool, which I thought was with giant inflatable Beatles. And yeah, there's the day, all great. And then that was part of it. So that was the first event I did. Unfortunately, then COVID happened, and it was quite difficult to do things because my view is that I need to be here and come here, but we couldn't. And obviously, everything went quieter. I do believe in better housing. I've often said that there's the London Housing Design Guide. I think that's the most important document written for planning in London, for instance, Arthur Morris standards, because it basically identifies from how big a balcony has to be, to how much outdoor space you have to have every flat, to sizes of bedrooms, etc., etc. And I've always thought Liverpool should try and have that as well. And there are some good architects in Liverpool, but one of the biggest firm is Chester Hall. This is one of their latest projects, very tall building. Shed, who again, this was their offsite with Urban Splash. And I suppose what I've been trying to do is, I thought, how do I not do a charrette again? How do I do a competition? So we organised a competition with the city region, which was called Liverpool Townhouse. It seemed to be a sort of the idea of housing, co-working was working at home was starting to happen, and how could we get there? And of course, we just had COVID, and people were starting to work at home more. We had a fantastic panel of judges with Joanna Abley, the government's chief planner, Kevin McLeod, the TV presenter, and Hazel, who's director at Share, James, who's a Liverpool architect, Barbara Spicer, who's used to be at Dane Housing, and Leafa, who's at the RIBA Northwest. So, and yeah, we had some fantastic entries. This one looked absolutely beautiful. Trouble is, it had very small rooms inside, but all of it was on the outside. But we thought this was a lovely entry. Again, people looking at terraced houses, reinventing. There's such a lot of work. There were 90 entries, ages to judge. Again, another beautiful entry that was back-to-back housing. This was Chester, where they had the idea of detached houses that are not quite detached, but a bit detached. And then this was the one that was the second place, which effectively it was an idea, again, back to back. So literally you have that plan and the other plan next to it. So you're only looking out. So you could build very dense housing, smaller plots. So you get maybe twice the amount of space by using roof terraces. And we thought it was very inventive, and the whole idea of using off-site construction. For the winners, and this was a fluke because it was an anonymous competition, I promise, but Studio Matt, that young talented practice I said, won it with this lovely idea of recreating, again, terraced houses, but rather than alleyways at the back, what you had was streets that children could play on, very sustainable, they're very unusual in plan. I think in a way, their architecture was quite traditional. It wasn't fully modern. It looked at traditional materials. And here's some of the beautiful drawings they did. So, again, this gained an awful lot of publicity for the architects in the city, the architects for that competition. Please, sorry, this isn't quite there yet, but we're doing a new one. Trying to get a real one this time, real sites, a housing developer who might do it. You can see this is only just mocked this up for today, but what we have is some old terraces. We're looking at what we can do. This is one of the sites, and this is the other one. I'm literally about to launch this, and what I'm pleased about, I've managed to sort out that it is only Liverpool architects who can enter. We're going to invite every registered Liverpool architect, which is about 90 of them, regional architects. And then we're going to have a panel who will shortlist them, and then they'll all get to a competition with a winner. They'll win a prize and maybe be able to build something. So that's the sort of thing that I feel very positive about. I'm also interested in the idea of trying to do an exhibition, maybe here, either for the Architecture Festival or here. So but an exhibition that can go here, but also be in London, be in Manchester, so it can promote architects outside the region. And I've got these names up just because these are the people who, over the years I've been here, have been incredibly helpful and been taking part in things and seem to be good architects. But if any of you know any others, that's just a list that I put together for today. I did push with the Architects Journal, saying there's something going on in Liverpool, you need to promote it. So the Architects Journal, about this time last year, did a whole special on Liverpool, which was great to see. And of course, we had that issue that we were talking about a moment ago in terms of the World Heritage Site being taken away. But it had lots of it. The whole issue was on it, so lots of what's going on in Liverpool. And I was really pleased with that because, I see a lot of people, they start saying, I didn't realise things were really happening there. It's interesting, Manchester's always had quite a good architecture scene. There's been about 4 architects who work both in Manchester and around the country. Birmingham a little bit, but Liverpool still only has a few. So I'm really keen to get people that way. I'm fascinated by education. I'm at St Edward's, Actually, Paul Faulkner was the year ahead of me at Faulkner Chester Hall. He told me to go to Sheffield University, and it was really good for parties. And I rather enjoyed it there. But also, I've known him all my life really since then, and it's been interesting seeing what success he's made in his practice. So I think getting to, and why I want to do it was when I was about 15, there was an architecture lecture. You know, we had law, you know, medicine, and then we had architecture, and I thought, and I wasn't bad at drawing, I thought, what a fantastic career to have. So, you know, that just small things can make a massive difference to. I suppose the other thing I've been involved with is with Matt Giles in particular from MAGMA, is setting up and helping support the Architecture Festival, which, you know, I think is the original one was set up in the space of about 3 months, just like COVID was still sort of around, and then a much bigger one last year, and I think now they're moving to a biannual thing. So, you know, I'm very pleased with that, because I think, again, and I presume, or if you're not involved with it, I presume, I think you are, because I think quite a lot of the walks were involved. So, and I'd like to see that grow and grow, because I think it could. So that's roughly what I'm doing. I'm sure you'll have some questions about some of that, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the projects that I've done here in Liverpool, just really, really quickly. That's the Royal Court as it was, and you all know where it is, so I don't need to explain. And this was what it was like when I was a kid. It was the bands, and it was used like that for a long time, but fell derelict. And then now it's taken over by Gillian and Kevin, who run it, and the trust that runs it. It's still owned by Liverpool City Council, and they do sort of Liverpool actors, musicals, comedy, and that's what they do. They're very, very successful that way. They got very little money from the Arts Council, so a lot of it was raising money. Again, that's what it was quite nice when it opened, and it was pretty grotty by the time we got there. So we were talking about how complicated it was inside and how much signage had grown old. And really what we said from the beginning is, you know, we'll need to come up to the front to make the ground floor have more space and create a cafe. And in these old theatres, the theatres are all here, but they always have such small amounts of space. So everything was a problem, toilets were a problem. So it was almost like slipping this new series of bars and breakout spaces off the theatre. And then I'm sure some of you have been, but you know, you eat before the theatre. So, and yeah, I suppose the auditorium, we chose this idea of slightly different colour from the theatre. And there it is now as it looks through it. It was fantastic the way this came up so well inside. And then, yeah, very complicated trying to do this seating and getting the viewing angles. But cool, because we had a theatre with a workshop, they made full-size mock-ups, so we could literally sit there and see. Where it was literally about moving that seat down by 20 mil or that by 20 mil. So it's fascinating doing. And there's everyone about to enjoy it before. The were a moment they had Shakespeare on, they didn't have it very often because it doesn't get so many seats. Yeah, there's the, yeah, in the end, we didn't have much money, but when we started to pull the building apart, we thought this brickwork behind was fantastic. So in the end, we exposed a lot of the rawness of the building, how it's made. In some really unusual ways, the way the structure is just very random. And then you get, you know, the travertine staircase, and then we just exposed the brickwork. Occasionally made some architectural gestures. And kept amusing moment when you go to the loo, you see the staircase that we took away because it wasn't going anywhere, kept the door. And then cuts within the building carefully, hopefully complements the old building. We use Court 10. Fantastic view from this terrace onto the St George's Hall. Yeah, and again, it's hard to imagine that was the man. You could hardly see the building. And so we said, we've got to take things away. I did this scribble that was, yeah, maybe we just have one sign and we actually go modern and do digital, then keep everything else open, have the cafe on the corner. And yeah, I thought, how about Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, and sort of taking the shape of that, and that's what we created. So in a way, it's influenced by something that's from Liverpool, giant digital sign. And then 410 seemed to go well with the red brickwork, so that the new bit was clearly modern. Wasn't not brilliant with pigeons, it has to be said, but anyway. And then we go with the theatre itself, with the sign app, which they occasionally make it move, but then every time they have something that's video, the founders tell them they haven't got planning permission for that, so occasionally we'll see it in that way. And there it is lit up for Brick Up the Merseyside. And there's some of the other pictures. Listen, people always think did this afterwards, but we did always say it could look like the famous Hopper painting, and it does. Yeah, so we're coming back to this as a bit of a sneak preview, really, but we're coming back to Liverpool again. Do you all remember the Penny Farthing? Yeah. Anyone go in? I went in once. Someone was selling overnight. It was 4 o'clock. Everyone was drunk, and I really didn't like it. But I think, but anyway, it was sent into the courtyard, very cheap makeover for the theatre, and but then Lady Anne Dart wanted to create a permanent museum, but also education centre to celebrate Ken Dodd's life. And I don't need to tell you, but I'll tell you, when I go to my office trying to explain who Ken Dodd was, it's very complicated. For millennials. And so I have to say he was huge. He was in the music hall originally, and then I have to say that actually he did, Tears did outsell the Beatles that year. I mean, like, you joking, and I listened to the record, it was still. And then, when you get to the Litty Man, lost completely. So, they can't actually believe it. But I managed to get all of these from Lady who presented it to her. I managed to get them on the internet, or the Diddy Man. I don't know how we managed. Now there is sort of Doddy Day, I think it was last week, and there's Lady Anne down here. And yeah, she's always had the great affinity. Ken Dodd did a show in, I think it was the 80s, where the theatre was going bankrupt, and he gave all the money to the theatre. He's not known for being generous, but he was, because he did it quietly, as she is. He lived up just around the corner from me, always in the house his mother bought, and then he's lived there, or he lived there all his life until he passed away. We all know the statue, the tickle stick, and the Diddy men sticking out. And of course, he got knighted, and there's Lady Anne. So next year, the National Museum are doing an exhibition on him, and a TV documentary going to happen, Happiness. So we're taking part of that exhibition, going to be put it into this new building. So the new building is going to be, so that's the theatre. It's going to be probably knocking down the courtyard building, building a new building next to it, which will be called Museum of Happiness. And these are just some of the diagrams of it. How do we plug on a new building? One of the important things to us is that the view here to St George's Hall is fantastic, so we want to be able to achieve that. And this is just some of it. Another drawing looking through the theatre, and this is like a diagram of it, quite an early one because we're still working on it now. And then this is a slightly more, it's probably not going to be quite as dark as this in the end, but the idea that there's a terrace looking over here, things are pointing here, it's sort of hiding the car park. It's quite dramatic, and it also links to the theatre as well. And some pretty drawings that we did trying to show that. And yeah, that's just a really, it looks like an initial sketch. So it looks like a full-on design, but it's actually an initial sketch. And then we did lots of this trying to work out how we could bring, there's an idea of tickle sticks hanging down from the ceiling, or when you go in the lift, you hear Ken Dodd's music and things. So trying to get that right is going to be important, I think, and without it being timeless rather than not just of the moment. So these are some lovely cartoons, and that's that idea. So yeah, that's really, looks nothing like that now, but that's the best images I've got of it. I'm going to end with just probably the building I'm most proud of, even though I've done a lot in my life. Our firm's been going 32 years, so we do a lot of work, and it's probably the smallest building we've done for a long time. It's the Alder Centre, and I used to live on Alder Road next to it. So this is the hospital. What I didn't realise is in the First World War there was a whole camp for Germans who were caught, and but actually apparently it's quite friendly system. They used to help in the hospital, the kids' hospital thing. So it was sort of a, it wasn't just. I never realised I grew up on a campsite. As you know, there was a whole big project where you knocked it down, built a new hospital. So I lived sort of just up here. So the idea of trying to design a building on the road you lived in was quite an honour. So that's the big hospital you've probably seen. That's, you build 2 new buildings here and then our little building at the end, and then the new park one day will happen. Goodness knows why it hasn't happened already. These are some of the buildings. So that's the big hospital. Better on the inside, I think, than the outside. And that's a building by Sir Michael Hopkins, which is a lovely building, just finished. So this is a new building that literally has, this one is also just finished by Ted Cullinan, again, another well-known architect, very sustainable building. And you can see our little building next to it. You probably know the Older Centre is for anyone who's affected by the death of a child. It tries to help people coping mechanisms with that, and it's a very moving thing. Everyone who works there has lost a child, so they're all volunteers. John there on the left who ran the project. They have a bereavement service at this time of the year where everyone who's lost a child has a leaf with a message on from their child, and that gets put on the tree that then gets put in the Older Centre. And these are some of the messages that they see. And they wanted something that was more relaxing. Didn't feel like a hospital because their old building didn't feel like that. So it was competition that we went, but we had this idea about the secret garden, that idea that, the book, The Secret Garden, that idea that this garden in the book forms a healing for both the young daughter who's sort of lost her mother and the father who's never recovered from losing a mother. And in the end, the garden's the thing that resolves it. It seemed to be a great idea, particularly in this massive site surrounded by a park. We wanted privacy, so it's basically a small building in a small park. I happened to go to the Gandhi Memorial Centre in Ahmedabad, and it's a beautiful building by Charles Career. It had something that I thought was interesting about it, the way the indoors and the outdoors came together. And this was a sketch of what we did. I think this might work. And it might even have, I think it has some sound there. It's not quite loud. This is a video we made of the competition, and this music was their theme music for their website. It always makes me cry when I watch it. Anyway, it made everyone cry in the interview too, but it was trying to convey the emotion of the different spaces in it. What I would say is a building, so that was like after 4 weeks, the competition hardly changed it. I wish we could do that all the time as architects, because we tend to redesign things like that. I'm not going to go through these plans, but effectively the idea of pitched roofs seemed to be something that's domestic, and West Derby is full of buildings with pitched roofs. When I did that sketch at the bottom, I didn't realise how difficult it would be to actually make it look like that. So it's incredibly complicated. And there's a picture from the garden looking at it. But it's very sustainable inside the building. We tried to use lots of off-site construction. So there it is, surrounded by building site a few years ago. And then the roof plan, which is incredibly complicated. So the roofs are all the same pitch. So when it's big, when the rooms are wider, then it goes taller. And when they're smaller, they're not as tall. It seems to be important. There's them making the roof. So you come in, it's like a big house really. You go in and it's got a and then all the materials are very natural. So you can see the bricks coming from the outside in. These fantastic roof lights. And you know, we spent a lot of time choosing things like the furniture, alleys that was always there. And then see looking through spaces, and then we took them around London to furniture showrooms to get good. This is the child death line. Yeah, it sounds terrible, doesn't it? But you have a child death and you read child death line, you get to someone like John, because they run the line 24 hours a day for the entire country, and it helps people literally within, I don't know, an hour of losing someone. So it's incredibly harrowing job. And then it goes more private into these smaller consulting rooms. And this was an early sketch with the window going to the garden and the walls. You see that it is built. Then looking from the other way, so that in each of these rooms you have privacy, you have height, and you have natural light. Back the other way. The garden's now taken quite a while ago. Yeah, and another larger. That's the building completed. And yeah, people have really enjoyed being there. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
So, I've got a load of questions being sent in, but it'd be much more interesting if we actually get the questions from people on the floor. So, are there any questions you've got before? I mean, I remember the old Nova Centre. When it got the State Professor. That is amazing, that design, absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Okay, anybody, no questions coming from the floor? Yes, thank you, sir.
Yeah, regarding the housing and first part, and setting up the ideas that should be carried out, how frustrating is it for you as an architect when you plan, say, these are really good, but then when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of private developers not following your plans and then building something that you don't, that isn't what you actually intended, it must be really frustrating. And they'll say, well, we just don't have the money to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah. You're talking about house builders, really, aren't you?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, I'm a pretty tough cookie, to be honest. So I don't allow that to happen much. But a lot of that is designing to a budget and not over designing. So actually, say, for example, having a really good quality brick is more important than having loads of fancy details on the building so that lasts longer. Spending money on the landscape is what lasts. The hardest thing about housing is, you know, you go some places and they need 3 car parking spaces per house. Just bonkers, you know, we're in an energy crisis. So often what should be beautiful front gardens is just entire tarmac. So I often think, to me, it's the public realms really important. So good paving, good quality material, because that's what the public get, and that's a better setting. Planning departments, often because they're under resourced, can't do enforcement. Often architects, the way the contract works, it's design and build, so you're novated to the house builder, who can sort of ignore drawings as much as he likes. But I suppose because, you know, we do a lot of I haven't shown any we do loads of big housing, and I suppose we try and work with the builders, and that's the best way to do it, because if you get them on side, and I don't believe in this old-fashioned architectural thing where we're the architects with our sort of bow ties and everything, and they're the builders. It doesn't work anymore. You've got to make them sort of feel part of it. So yeah, it's hard to do, but I think quite a lot of it is architects over designing and trying to protect every detail, and then a builder just says, well, I'm not doing it, I'm not going to talk to them anymore.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, I was very interested in the Webster Triangle competition.
The which one?
The Webster Triangle, Webster Road.
Oh yeah.
It's like this road shops and road.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that, because I was working with the group area and two sites that they were very there with that.
Yeah.
And just like how the competition was.
Well, after doing the townhouse competition, it went so well, and it sort of everyone seemed to be interested in it. I was trying to talk with Mark Dickens in the city region to see if to try and do a real competition. Is it possible? It's quite hard actually, and is it possible to do it with Liverpool architects? Not, because the townhouse had people all over the country, and it was fortunate that a Liverpool architect won, but not, it was a fluke in a way. But Mark managed to find these two sites by the developer there, and they've agreed to do a competition. They haven't agreed to build it yet, but I think in most architectural competitions I've been involved in the years, quite often an owner of a site will not want to say if there's a winner, I have to build it, because sometimes that is a tricky situation. So that's what's happened about it. So it'll be quite open. As I said, we'll probably pick, I imagine, about a dozen firms, something like that, to do the competition, and then we'll judge it and pick a winner and a second place. And then I'll be putting a lot of pressure on the developer to try and deal with it. But I mean, what attracted me to it is it's a generic problem, not only in Liverpool, in every city, that those fantastic terraced houses could be completely modernised, have more open plan areas, you could put living rooms upstairs or not downstairs. And no one seems to do it, and they just end up being so decayed, but the scale of them is so great.
I'll pick up on some of the ones that have been said already. Great question. What are the key ingredients in terms of process for good design, and how can the local planning authority contribute to this?
Okay. I always think that if I look at the best buildings we've done, it's because it's the clients. It's having good clients, having clients who care about design, and when we've got that dialogue, we can do our best buildings. When the client is only interested in money, or every client's interested in money, but when their main focus is budget, and where you're designing things and saying you can't have it, it's incredibly frustrating. So I'd say number one is good clients, and I'd say on the whole Liverpool doesn't have enough good clients. When I compare the clients we have in London, who are really sort of inspirational in the care they take, it's understandable, because say the values are very different, the housing prices are very different, office rents are very different, so it's very hard to build even a building of this quality, incredibly hard in Liverpool and Manchester and Bristol, actually, where we also work. So I think that's the problem with it. In terms of planning authority, I do believe planning authorities there needs to be more resourcing. It's simple as that. They the last 10 years there's either they've moved to the private sector because there's a different financial reward for that, or they've just been under-resourced. So I think that's it. I do think things like design review panels are something that every local authority in London has. Design review panels, and any significant building goes to them. I mean, there's about 12 of them, every borough has them, and I still think it's where places matter need to come into it, or need to be allowed to come into it, but funded more. So and that can really help a planning officer who maybe is not as confident about design to have confidence in a decision. So so I'd say those are the aspects that I would.
A company that was in Northwest once told me that if you took a design to Liverpool City Council, their first reaction would be no. Take it to Manchester, and they'd say, well, might fit here, might fit there. You could do there's a real flexibility in Manchester that we didn't certainly have in those days.
Yeah, but you've seen how they've buggered up Manchester with all those towers to the north of it now. I mean, I agree with, when my wife's from Manchester, so I used to go, particularly in the 90s, and it was felt like they're really doing brilliant regeneration, Liverpool doing nothing. But now you go there and there's just this, beyond the GMEX, is it? That's just this. And I'm like, well, yeah, I don't think Liverpool particularly wants that. I mean, my experiences in meeting people in the planning department is that they're all very enthusiastic and good people. And, you know, they've commissioned a lot of good master plan studies for the different areas of Liverpool. So I think, but it's resourcing, I'm convinced.
Where would you put heritage in the design process?
Well, it's nowadays it is key. I mean, I think we're getting to a point where if you try and knock anything down, you in planning, you've got to make a case for why it's knocked down. And there's a useful thing now that the carbon story is helping that. The problem we have, and I think Liverpool's been bad over the years at knocking down some buildings that shouldn't have been. You know, just because a building isn't listed, it doesn't mean to say you can't knock it down. If you look at developers like Urban Splash, some of their great early successes were picking old warehouses and adding new bits to them, but bringing life into those warehouses. So I'm a great believer in old buildings can make bits of new buildings even more successful because the character, and often you couldn't build to the quality of those older buildings. So I think it's key. But you know, you've probably seen in London, Marks and Spencers are trying to knock down a building next to Selfridges, and it's you know, it's going to be very interesting where that ends up because you know the building does look possible to retrofit. Retrofit is everything now, and it's carbon. To be honest, it's coming more from the carbon than it is from heritage lobbies because heritage lobbies are pretty strong anyway. So I think, but I just don't think you know there is. I don't like slagging off things in Liverpool, so I won't say where it is, but there is a long terrace of buildings that were knocked down for, I think, a student hall residence that I always remember as a kid being rather a pleasant terrace, but it probably wasn't listed, so it's all gone now, apart from a pub on the end.
You mentioned about children.
Sorry.
Children I grew up with, schools that they went to, nothing was ever mentioned.
Yeah.
Job opportunities that it can lead to in the future. So, whilst I was going to ask, have you got any plans in place to show children that there is architecture?
Very good question. Well, sorry, I forgot to mention that my business partner is president of the RIBA, Simon Alford. So the RIBA does things here to try and get out to schools, and I think that's a campaign I'm trying to get Simon to put into. But they do things all around the country, and I think that is a really good way of doing it. The Institute promoting that, getting into schools. I think it's also a lot of practices. I mean, we did a lot of schools. And we have kept in touch with all those schools. We go at least once a year to do a lecture on how to be an architect or a workshop. And it's you know, I remember there's a lad in Dagenham who did school in Dagenham, which is, you know, a pretty rough part of Liverpool, London. And 15, he came to our office for the day. A year later, he came and worked for a week. He went to university, very poor family, came to do his year out, and now he's one of our best architects. And it's that one time he saw us. Yeah. Yeah, I agree entirely. I mean, to me, I'd focus more on secondary, but there's a friend of mine does this program, Dengineers, on CBBC, Sat, who's used to live here actually, and things like that are really important. You know, things like grand designs have been really important for people getting interested in art. You know, it inspires a lot of kids. You know, when I teach at university, if I interview kids, quite a lot of them would want to do architecture because they'd seen grand designs, and there's all those George Clark's one about, you know, sheds and things. So they're also part of it. But yeah. And making them believe they can be an architect as well. It's a long course, don't forget. A lot of people are put off by that.
I think I know I think you'll know what I'm going to ask you.
I think I probably do.
About design review, because we had some correspondence.
Yeah.
It seems to me that design review, the way it's conducted, is a very hit and miss process.
Yeah.
Now, where I live in Crosby, as it happens, a part of Crosby Town Centre directly opposite where I live, the scheme there was subject to design review. And it was generally welcomed by the panel of places matter who conducted it. Then, of course, Stoughton Council Planning Committee went and refused. So, anyway, it's finally been approved. But, I mean, that was because the client, the architects, asked for design review. In the correspondence I've had with you, I pointed out that there are some major schemes in the city region. And I mean, one of them is the £73 million project on Southport Promenade to redevelop the theatre. And that is being supported by large quantities of public money, including 20 million Metro's Strategic Investment Fund. When you look on the planning application website, I can't see anything. I mean, there's a design and access statement that's been put in by the owner, but I can't see anything that is subject to design review. The point I was making to you was that if there's going to be large quantities of public money going into these projects, such as that one, surely it should be a requirement, particularly by the Metro Mayor, because he's putting 20 million in, that there is a proper design review process conducted that's made public and that informs planning application.
Yeah, and thanks, Adrian. And I'm seeing the mayor in 2 weeks, and it's something I intend to put in.
Sorry?
I'm seeing the mayor in 2 weeks.
Right.
And it's something that I intend to ask him to do on not just that project, but other projects. That any project that is getting major funding from the council, if you take out, so if it's 20 million, you take out, I don't know, 10 grand for design reviews, 2 of those, it's peanuts. So I will be asking him that and seeing if we can do it. And thank you for prompting me on that, but I still haven't got an answer back to you. I did check today and they are looking into it on the one in Southport, but I don't disagree with anything you've said there. I think one of the first things I said was, when I first became the job, was the ferry terminal, the new one. I said, did that have design review? And it hadn't, but the horse had bolted it, it's got planning. I think there's a new project for Exchange Station, which is going to have quite significant money. So I'm going to be prompting him to say, look, this is the least you can do. So yeah, I think in terms of planning committees turning around things that design review panels recommend for approval, design review panel, as you know, is only advisory, and that happens to us in London, where you'll get a glowing report and the planning officers will turn it down, or the councillors will turn it down. But yeah, thank you for prompting me. Sorry, thank you for your letter originally. And can I assure you that I will be saying that as strongly as I can when I see him.
Well, I think it's particularly important with there's large amounts of capital still around, and there may be more to come through the levelling up agenda in all these towns. And if in order to get the most bang for your buck, surely to God, we can ask for some good design as part of the spending of it.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the levelling up did give Liverpool Council, Liverpool City Region money to do design codes last year as part of a pilot project. I know City Region.
Something in Liverpool.
Yeah, but it's one of only 12 in the entire country. It's chosen because they're piloting it to see if it works. So I think that I know City Region are very keen to get some officers for a thing called public practice, which is assist planning officers, and I think they're very keen on that. They're operating in some of the city regions, but that could reinforce things too.
Anybody else got a question. It's quite interesting one here, actually, quite maybe useful to us.
Mm.
How can we as a civic society push for better design quality with limited resources? What are the kind of golden tricks to comment on in planning applications with poor design quality if you don't have time to engage with the local plan policies and NP?
Yeah, so, because everything's voluntary. I mean, it depends. I don't know the makeup of your society, whether or not there are planners as part of it who know legally a little bit more what are considered to be proper things you can object about. Quite often I see more voluntary letters that come in either saying something negative about a scheme we're doing, and you can see that they're aiming at the wrong thing. So they might be aiming at, I don't know, it's blocking daylight, even though it's 60 metres away, and it's actually just dismissed straight away. So the most important thing is to find out I suppose what would consider to be material in a planning application, what would consider to be something that's negative. Now that takes some experience. It can't just be I don't like the look of it. So I think and I do find everybody as planning consultants or someone who understands planning are the most helpful people to deal with that. But clearly, writing letters is important, and it is a democratic process. And I'd also argue I might start using carbon as a problem now as well, just to add to it.
Anyone else? Yeah, John.
Yes, you mentioned something about the playhouse. I'm sorry, it's not your practice that's
Yeah.
no point in saying.
Thank you.
But I was just wondering, will it do anything about Williamson Square? Because I found that
Yeah.
one of the most disappointing public spaces, and so
It is
we're
part
talking about design for buildings, but design for spaces is.
The competition was about the square too. And if you look in the architecture journal, you'll see a picture of what they're trying to do. So it is there were two bits of funding, for what I can understand, one for the playhouse, one for with the city council, one for the square. So if you look at that, they have quite dramatic plans with a lot of urban greening in it. Yeah, it's miserable. It's miserable, not helped by that big cheap, the Liverpool shop over the years. Whereas I think the other two sides could be really good. They've just sort of slightly slipped. So yeah, but yeah.
So that's potentially good news then.
I think it has got, yeah. Have a look in the AGM.
And there's a question here about what do you expect for the Liverpool City Region Spatial Development Strategy? Will it have enough teeth to improve design quality? And the latest proposal is design reviews of projects of 500 units and over.
If I'm really honest, I haven't been involved with that, so I don't really know, but I will. It's something that I meet Mark once a month and we'll go through the new initiatives. At the moment, we're going through this competition that's coming on, so I'm afraid I can't really help on that.
There's one question about cost engineering. Exciting schemes, according to this person, are often watered down when the costs start to soar, which leads to basically not so nice architectural design.
Yeah, I think what we were talking about earlier, I think that's about planning authorities giving planning for things with some detail. What tends to happen is, if you're an architect, you do say the elevations, you mark up that brick is this one because it's a nice brick and it's probably cost some money, and you say metal lining, something that's all the details you draw in detail, and then if you're working for a contractor, they then ask you to take all those notes off and leave it as brick. So a planning officer shouldn't miss that, but they do sometimes. I'm not saying here, everywhere they do.
And a new report we published this weekend by Arab and the University of Liverpool called Cities Alive, Designing Cities That Work for Women, indicates that female needs are not always addressed in urban design. Any suggestions about designing spaces and buildings to be more inclusive?
Sorry, there's been a few papers on that I saw in the magazines a few weeks ago about spaces for women. I mean, I suppose just good spaces for all people, from women to more diverse, but I think I think what we're finding is spaces are getting greener, which is good. And that large empty spaces tend to be not places that people want to go to. So creating public spaces that have smaller bits, smaller cul-de-sacs that people can sit in, gather in, seems to be something that can work. And all the obvious things like there's no dead end in spaces. So I think, but I'll have to read that paper. It sounds interesting.
Virtually the end of this. Is there anybody else want to ask a question? Yes.
How can we make the question right? I'm moving to UK and I'm very impressed. And then I start to going champion. Then it's just now you are how we use this. Then I would like to know as a practice from architect in your also good relationship and all happened. I'm very interested to know your trends. Then how the other cities like some can do the same things. Because it's very, very effort. One part.
Well, it's very kind of you to say. I sometimes don't think I've achieved anything, but I suppose, as I said, at my beginnings, it is trying to promote good design. And I think we have, in Steve Rodden, we have someone who's really interested in that. He's interested in all construction, actually, construction and engineering. So I think that's something that, I hope to encourage. I really do think what you need, it's promoting the local talent here. It's getting them better jobs and better opportunities, promoting better design, and it's patience. And yeah, it happens quite slowly. But I think things like the walks and things you do are great, and I think the festival's great, promoting good design, promoting an interest in it to people being aware of their surroundings and saying we could have it could be better. So some of it's really simple, but things what I suppose what I look for is exemplars, things that are going to be done well. So I was privileged to judge the Liverpool Museums competition for Canning Dock down the road, where a really talented architect, Asif Khan, has won competition there. And then we got Tate Liverpool doing, another very talented art. None of these are Liverpool architects, I'm afraid, but some of them are working with Liverpool architects, which is another way of doing it. That you, for example, the Playhouse is won by Howard Tompkins, a very famous firm, working with Magma, who are Liverpool based. So I think that's a good way of Liverpool practices sort of starting to get more well known. And then we have the Slavery Museum, which is being done. So I think there's going to start to be some great new projects built, and I think you need them. What I'd love are the Wirral Waters, Liverpool Waters, and that Garden Festival site to be exemplary as well. I'm not saying they're not, but I think I'd love to see some of them built so we could, actually promote those. But to be honest, a lot of it was already happening. There's a great architecture scene here, I think, two great universities, very strong students, great tutors there and professors there. So, I think it's got a lot of talent in the city.
I was amazed you said 90 architecture practices.
Yeah, but I mean, I've probably about 70% of them are like one person or two people, I think, but registered practices.
Just before we finish this evening, I want to call upon MCS member Graham Jones to make a presentation to Paul. So thank you for coming to speak to us this evening. Graham was brought up in South Liverpool. He had a successful career with ICI. He took early retirement. He trained, and he works voluntarily as a counsellor for Relate. His passion is Liverpool history, and while he claims to know absolutely nothing about architecture, I believe architecture ultimately about people. So you may disagree, perhaps, with that view when he presents you with, he's going to thank you with Graham.
Glad I'm not making a speech.
You do have to make a speech.
One book.
Oh, wow, thank you.
So Walking on Water Street. I think it'll be a curate egg for you, actually.
Wow, what a fantastic. What a gift. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't know, is it coffee outside afterwards or we done?
Probably not.
Not. There are some pubs
We're
around here,
mingle for a bit.
but we really good to have you this morning. Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for this. Lovely.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.